Now let's start with the Klutch. First of all, people already know about it, but just quick intro and uh, what's new on the open source side, or what's new with Klutch?
Well, first of all, the application development becomes more of a topic in the Kubernetes ecosystem, like we've predicted. Where the past was more about lift and shift of VM workloads, now there's more traction to application developers using Kubernetes to actually run their web applications. And in that case, you have more of a competition with technologies such as Cloud Foundry. So that leads to the question, how do you expose data service automation to application developers on Kubernetes? And we've been thinking about this problem for quite a while, and Klutch is obviously our response to it. And the main assumption is you want to have local applications developer self-service, so that application developers can describe their entire application system within their local Kubernetes cluster. We give with Klutch the application developer the impression that databases were local, where they actually are not. Because in our experience, database operations, whether it is with VM or container-based automation, is kind of a tricky thing to do, and you want to keep it in a separate team. So if you separate the data service automation from the application deployments, then how do you allow that local on-demand self-service? So Klutch solves that problem by providing a plugin that you plug into your application developer cluster that gives you the abstractions for all the data services, like declare service instance, and a database will be created for you. If you do that, and you have a lot of Kubernetes clusters in a lot of different database backends that you integrate with Klutch, how would you get a central overview of who uses data services in which application clusters? And the answer to that is the Klutch control plane. So the Klutch control plane allows you to integrate any data service automation once and expose this automation across all your Kubernetes clusters for all your application developers, enabling that local self-service.
Can you talk about your open source Klutch, if I'm not wrong, last year? What kind of feedback, what kind of interest, what kind of traction you have seen for Klutch?
So first of all, what we do with our prospects in open source Klutch is walk through the abstractions and the major design assumptions. For example, do you agree that database automation should be run outside of the Kubernetes cluster? So even if somebody wants to adopt a Kubernetes operator, should that operator run in a Kubernetes application cluster? And the answer and the consensus for larger organizations is clearly no. For small environments and really mature developer teams, that might be different. But at scale, the consensus is you want to keep it separate. So we've been step by step confirming the design assumptions of Klutch, and so far got zero pushback on the core assumption. At the same time, adopting such a technology like Klutch is not a simple decision. It goes to the core on how to design the application delivery experience, and there are many more frameworks that do Kubernetes orchestration, like for example, those who allow you to do virtual clusters and build your own application developer experience with Kubernetes. And you have to figure out how these things come together. So decision-making about Klutch is not as simple. What we see now is the first POCs where people put Klutch into their organizations and just make it a reality to their application developers.
When we look at open source can go only so far. It can solve problem of either teams who have all the capabilities or who wants to dip their toes in that. But commercialization is when it really get into production, where companies have, they're saying a throat to choke. So talk a bit about the commercial journey of Klutch.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, what Klutch on its own is a container orchestration and integration framework. It solves the problem, given that you have some sort of data service automation, how do you make this automation accessible to developers in a large amount of application clusters while having that central control plane? That's what Klutch open source solves. It provides that domain model, those abstractions, but it does not come with the actual automation. So so you actually need integrations with Klutch to actually solve the data service challenge for your application developers. And that's what Anynines Hub is about. It extends Klutch with data service backends such as the Anynines data services that do virtual machine provisioning versus AWS data service that do pod provisioning. And upcoming is Klutch for AWS, which does AWS services, including S3 and RDS, and more are upcoming.